Why are we here? You may hear that question and think many things. Why are you in the house you live in? Why are you in the job that you're in? Why do you live in the city you do? Why are you watching this video now? These are all specific ways to interpret that first question, but what if you had to think even bigger? Why are we here, on this planet, at this time? I first really began to be challenged by this question 10 years ago when a group of like-minded people from our church small group really began to feel like we were supposed to do more than just meet together once or twice a week, have a short Bible study, and repeat the process. Instead, we found ourselves being drawn more to stepping outside of the church and going downtown and spending time talking with people. We were spending more time walking through downtown streets, sharing a cup of coffee or a bottle of water, and having conversations with people that we otherwise would not have seen from a mile away in our comfy, well-funded safe haven. We realized that we had a greater purpose than to just do church amidst our normal life. We had a greater purpose, a mission. Ultimately, that led to us planning Christ Reconciled Church right here in downtown Johnson City.
So through that action of planting the church here in this neighborhood and getting to know the people, that helped me to begin to know the answer to that big question. So again, I ask, why are we here and who are we?
If you're a follower of Jesus, you understand that we, humanity, were created by God specially. We were set apart from the rest of His creation. We aren't just plants or animals. We're like God in that we were created to exist in community like He does. We can connect with Him in ways that the rest of creation is unable to. We were placed above the rest of creation so that we might exercise dominion over it. Genesis 1:28 says, "And God blessed them, and God said to them, 'Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth.'" God's creation of humanity came with an objective, a mission. Thousands of years after creation and the establishment of humanity's mission, God began to reveal a more focused and specific set of marching orders for a subset of mankind. In Genesis 12, God reached out to a man named Abram and said, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation. And I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." There are two things that we can learn from the promise that God made. The first is that God was putting Abram and his family in a specific place for the purpose of God's mission. The second is that God was seeking to bless all of humanity through this one family, through His chosen people. The greatest example of this would come through Jesus Christ Himself. If anyone could demonstrate a purpose, it was Jesus. That purpose, however, did not make sense to many of His contemporaries. When Jesus began His ministry, He didn't follow the conventional wisdom of someone who wanted to build a movement that would impact the whole world. He surrounded Himself with tradesmen and tax collectors. This was shocking to the religious elite that assumed one claiming to be the Messiah would rather have spent time with them. This came to a head in Luke 5:30-32. And says, "And the Pharisees and their scribes grumbled at His disciples, saying, 'Why do you eat and drink with the tax collectors and sinners?' And Jesus answered them, 'Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance.'" This was the light bulb moment for me and for those of us who had planted Christ Reconciled Church. We realized that we, the church, are here to serve the lost, the broken, and the often forgotten. We, the people of God, have been intentionally placed on the earth with the mission of being for others, wanting their good. When the church fails to understand this mission of place, being where we are because God wants us there, we can become lethargic, more satisfied sitting in a pew every Sunday to the detriment of the whole world around us. Instead, we began to venture out, And the longer we spent trying to become part of this new community that we felt God had called us to, the more we began to realize that there was a specific crisis that the church could respond to. A group of people we'd begun to really connect with and grow to love is a population completely overwhelmed by addiction.
Over the months and years following our planting the church, I saw how many lives had been affected in some way by addiction. This shouldn't have surprised me since my sister died of addiction in 1999, but I didn't realize at the time how I was being prepared to care for people with the same struggles many years later. Eventually, I found myself serving lunch alongside a friend at the Day Reporting Center, which is a prison diversion program for high-risk, high-need felony offenders with addictions. I saw how much of an uphill climb it is for people who are addicted to substances, particularly if they have a criminal record. We chatted, we ate, we did community service side by side, and I got to know people who struggled with addictions as real people with stories. Being a researcher and having studied neonatal abstinence syndrome for several years, I had already had some understanding of just how big a problem addiction is. But the more I studied and asked questions of experts and those with personal struggles, the more I became aware of the magnitude of the problem. In 2019, we learned that about 13% of the population over 12 had used some type of illegal substance in the last month. That was over 30 million people. Nationwide, neonatal abstinence syndrome is present in 1% of births, maybe a little more. But what really scares us is the number of overdose deaths in the US alone. In the 20 years from 1999 through 2019, overdose deaths in America grew from less than 20,000 to over 70,000 deaths. While it looked like we were beginning to turn a corner as we approached 2020, we're now learning that after COVID-19 lockdowns began, overdose deaths took a sharp turn for the worse, leading to a record number of overdose deaths from July 2019 to July 2020. We're trying so many things to stop this from happening through medical and criminal justice approaches, but people are still dying. There must be something else that can be done. These numbers may seem overwhelming, but more overwhelming has been getting to know people and families and seeing firsthand how painful the struggle is. I knew a lot of the statistics before I started volunteering with the prison diversion program. I knew there was a need, but it wasn't personal. I could think about it occasionally, even do research about addiction, but I could lay it aside and go home. Once I met people, really got to know them, I couldn't so easily turn it off or walk away. That may sound daunting, like it was a negative thing. It has not been. Through walking alongside people in their struggles, I've come to see that just my presence is valuable. Just listening and caring what someone says or showing up when I said I would show up is therapeutic. Yes, hearing the stories and sharing someone's pain or struggle is hard, but it's oh so worth it.
When I was growing up, for some reason, our family decided that we were supposed to own and raise llamas. And for the most part, we treated them as pets, but like any other pet, there was a great deal of cleanup on a consistent basis. If we were going to have whatever enjoyment we could have from the llamas, we would have to be ready to deal with the mess that followed. As I began to see what it could look like to call the church to help to combat addiction, I knew just how difficult it could and would be. But I was constantly brought back to what's become one of my favorite life verses. Proverbs 14:4 says, "Where there are no oxen, the manger is clean, but the abundant crops come by the strength of the ox." Think about the wisdom in that. In a primarily agricultural economy, having animals who could bear much of the heavy lifting was vital to one's success and survival. But with keeping those animals comes all the struggle that comes with maintaining them. In other words, if you're going to get anything done, things can and probably will get messy along the way. We have to realize that it will be hard to engage with this section of the population who struggles with addiction. We need to acknowledge that it will get messy, but there is greater value in the abundance of crops that can come from tilling this soil. Like we've said, it's hard, but it is worth it.
You may be hearing this and asking if addiction ministry is really something that you're ready to engage in. And you're probably thinking of many valid concerns. It's important to outline and work through the barriers that people and whole churches face when deciding to engage in any kind of ministry to people who misuse substances. Just know that you're not alone in feeling concerned. There are a few main concerns that we've seen consistently. We've done some surveys with churchgoers in our area. we've learned of some pretty common barriers. One of the most common is that addiction is a medical problem that should be handled by experts. This doesn't just hold true for addiction. Anyone who watches television knows there is medication for just about any condition. We have come to think that medical science should be able to solve all the problems. Medicine can be helpful in some ways with addiction, but we should not refer someone away and forfeit any responsibility. We want to inspire the church to keep people close and walk alongside them, whether or not it's for actual medical treatment. Probably the primary barrier to churches taking on this problem is stigma. Stigma toward people who are addicted to substances, not just from the church, but definitely from the church at times, is quite common. Those people are dangerous. Those people might steal from me. We all know the stigma goes both ways. People who live with addictions often speak of the church as judgmental and unwelcoming. There's some validity in both groups' preconceptions. There is a possibility of danger or stealing. There's a possibility of judgment and hesitance to welcome. But we believe if we can reduce the us-them barrier and get to know each other as people, that stigma will evaporate. We have found that some of the understanding is enhanced when we talk about some of the likely origins of addiction. Another barrier we hear often is concern that I might do the wrong thing. That's exactly why we're so excited to share those numbers with the church. We want to stir up real motivation to see things change, but then to follow up that motivation with practical how-to training that leaves the church feeling like it is equipped to accomplish great things. Again, if you're feeling any or many of these concerns, our intent is not to leave you feeling ashamed. We have experienced all of these things ourselves and still do at times. Instead, our hope is that the value we learn to see in addiction ministry will cause the barriers that keep us from engaging to seem less daunting. Like we've said, we've been energized as we have built relationships with people who were struggling with addiction and their families. We found ourselves being more and more motivated to love them, incorporate them into the church. Learning about something called trauma-informed care really was a game changer in how we found ourselves looking at people and their circumstances. While there isn't nearly enough time to go into great depth on this, knowing how to know people has been truly life-changing. Let me briefly explain the origins of trauma-informed care and why it has been so influential. There was a study done back in the 90s that showed that adversity experienced in childhood, abuse, neglect, is very predictive of health in adulthood. It's also very predictive of addiction. When we're threatened or stressed, our bodies naturally respond in survival mode. You may have heard the term fight, flight, freeze. Those are our responses to threat. We know that ongoing stress or neglect or abuse in childhood actually builds the child's brain to constantly be primed to survive, to deal with threats through these responses. This is why we often see traumatized children lash out or withdraw. Those responses last into adulthood. We also know one reason people use drugs may be to calm those feelings, to self-medicate. Understanding this really helped me to have more empathy for people, rather than thinking that person is irresponsible and commits crimes so they can get drugs or get high. I began to see this may be a desperate person who just has no other way to cope. They're just trying to survive. That doesn't mean that crime is excusable or the person isn't responsible for their actions. We all are. But it very much motivates me to want to come alongside someone and help them learn new ways to cope. Trauma-informed care is just that, having empathy for someone who's been traumatized somehow and understanding they may be doing the best they can at this point. But we don't want to leave them there. We want to help them capitalize on their strengths and come up with a better way to cope.
Having fully immersed ourselves in trauma-informed care and existing as a church in a high-need area, we really felt like we were being called to commit fully to helping the church see its potential in serving in this way. After lots of planning and working with multiple other nonprofit and medical organizations, Uplift Appalachia was founded in July of 2019. Our mission is to inspire and motivate the church to be the solution to the addiction crisis that we're facing as a nation. But more than to just say, you should do something, we also want to offer training and practical concepts to the church that they can use to get started. We believe that an intrinsically motivated church is the key to making an earth-shaking impact. We say intrinsically motivated because we've seen that when volunteers are merely trying to check a service box but are not deeply connected to the mission, their enthusiasm can fade. When people are passionate about the need and their role in the solution, there's much more longevity in their effectiveness. They stick with it more because this is something they want to do, not something they have to do. We believe that if we develop an intrinsically motivated church, that they can be shown inventive ways, that they can intercede in people's lives in a powerful way. We call that inventive way wraparound care. We define wraparound care as intentionally increasing interpersonal connection. And we believe that it is the key to lasting change in the overwhelming addiction statistics we referenced before. This is because interpersonal connection or community is rooted in how we as humans were designed. Remember when we saw the huge uptick in overdose deaths when COVID-19 led to mass social distancing? It left people who desperately need a structured support system with less access to connect with others, the very thing we know they need. At the same time God gave humanity its mission, He established that we needed to accomplish this mandate with others. It's when we have a deep connection with others that we are most capable of flourishing. There's so much in this simple idea that we're excited to help teach. It's changed everything about the way that we try to exist within the church, and we think it will be of great value to the rest of the church as well. We're excited to help churches and organizations that need motivated volunteer bases and individuals understand wraparound care and find simple solutions for applying it to their current endeavors. We're ready to help provide application in areas that we know are the most needed areas for the population that struggles with addiction, specifically through ride sharing and housing. I already asked you why you're here, but now I want to ask a few more things. Knowing how real the addiction crisis is and seeing how many people are falling through the cracks, what now? The church is filled with the very people who should understand their God-given mandate to go to the least of these, the sick. If the church isn't going to step up and serve, then who will? People are dying at an alarming rate. So if we aren't going to step up now, when will we? What could be more urgent? Why are you here?